Hey there, my name is James Davis, and I am a coach from DragTheBar.com. Today I'm going to be talking to you about a very important concept, which is when we should bet and when we should check. Poker basically comes down to a small handful of decisions that you're going to need to make in slightly different contexts in order to be successful. The most common by far is, should I bet here? Now before we answer this question, let's just take a quick look at why we bet. Every bet you make is going to be for one of two reasons: to get your opponent to call or to get your opponent to fold. Now, evaluating when you want your opponent to call or fold should be the easy part. Clearly, if you have 3-4 offsuit and the board is ace-ace-king, you're betting because you want your opponent to fold. Now, if you have pocket aces and you bet when the board is ace-ace-king, you obviously want your opponent to call. But between these two situations are a wide variety of situations, but in general, determining whether or not you're going to want to make your opponent fold or call isn't going to be too difficult. The difficult thing is going to be to know when you can get your opponent to fold with a bet and when you can get your opponent to call your bet when you want him to. Today, let's look at a few examples to get you thinking about these two situations. First, let's tackle the easier of the two situations, which is, in my opinion, betting when you want your opponent to call. While there can be a lot of nuance to betting when you believe you have the best hand, it really does boil down to a few basic situations and questions. First, if I bet here, how likely is it that my opponent will call me down or raise me with a worse hand? Second, if I decide not to bet, how likely is it that my opponent will improve to a better hand than mine? Third, if I decide not to bet, might my opponent try to bluff me in a spot where he would fold if I went ahead and bet? And fourth, if I check, how likely is it that my opponent will improve to a worse hand than mine that he'll then give me action with? Now, if you can properly answer these four questions, you'll really be on the fast track to knowing how to play when you believe you're ahead. Now, let's say you had pocket tens, and the board is the 9 of hearts, the 6 of hearts, and the 3 of spades. All we need to do is answer each of those questions to determine what to do. Number one, if I bet here, how likely is it my opponent will call me down or raise me with a worse hand? It seems fairly likely, right? I have an overpair to the board. He can have lots of lower pairs or draws that would call or raise my bet. Now, if I decide not to bet, how likely is it that my opponent will improve to a better hand? It seems really likely, right? I mean, there are a lot of draws he can have, as well as even hands like Queen Jack or Ace 4 that might fold if I bet, but actually have a good chance to become better than me if I check. Now, if I decide not to bet, might my opponent try to bluff me in a spot where he'd fold if I bet? He might, but a lot of times he has a draw. He'll be happy to take a free card with them, so I don't think he'll necessarily try to blow us off if he has a decent chance to come back to us. Now, if I check, how likely is it my opponent will improve to a worse hand than mine that he'll pay me off with? I don't think it's very likely. I mean, he might have a hand like ace-8 that could improve to an 8 and then pay me off, but it's sort of a long shot. Most of the time that he improves, he'll actually make a hand better than my tens, or he'll still be too weak to call down much. You know, like if he has ace-2 and he makes a 2 on the turn. Given these answers, it really seems our flop play is obvious, right? We need to just go ahead and bet. It's certainly no time to slow play. We probably have the best hand right now, but it doesn't seem like much good can really come from checking. So, like, a lot could go wrong on the turn or river, and right now we just need to make him pay to try to draw out on us. On the flip side, let's say the flop is 10-4-4 with no connecting suits, and we have the pocket tens again. Our answer changes dramatically here, right? Because, well, let's just answer our questions. If we bet, will he call or raise worse? Possibly. It would really have to be as a bluff, or on the rare chance he has a 4. Now, if he has the 4, of course, we're going to get action from him later on, so betting, that's not really an argument for betting here. Now, if we check, can he improve to a better hand than ours? It really seems almost impossible. He would need to either make, running jacks with a hand like Queen Jack, or in the unlikely case he has an overpair already, he would still just need to hit a 2-outer. Might he bluff if we check? Now, this seems like a situation where I think a lot of opponents will bluff because he's almost certainly has nothing here, so he's not going to play pot control a lot of the times. He'll also be easily convinced that we have nothing too because the board just isn't very connected. So he might just go ahead and say, yeah, I'm just going to take a stab here with 8-9 and hope I take the pot down against ace high or something. Now, the last question was, might he improve to a worse hand than ours if we check? Absolutely, right? Because while he would probably fold Queen Jack on this flop, if he makes a queen or a jack on the turn, we're going to be very likely to get some action from him on the turn and river. we're at least going to get one bet, probably two. So this is like a great spot to slow play, which basically means to not bet even though you're almost sure you have the best hand. So I think that if you just take these four questions and try to ask them to yourselves, either when you're reviewing your hands or in the moment, you're going to feel much more confident about when to bet and when to check when you believe you're ahead on the flop, and you won't feel lost nearly as much. Now for the other case. This is the tricky one, and that is betting when you want your opponent to fold. Betting without a hand is just commonly referred to as bluffing, obviously. A lot of people refer to it as aggression, and it's really a mandatory part of your game if you're going to be successful as you move up in limits. But wondering when to be aggressive offers us a brand new set of questions. First off, how likely is it that my opponent will fold right now if I bet? Second, how likely is it that I can get him to fold later on if I bet right now? Third, do I have any outs to improve to, even though my hand right now isn't very good? Fourth, can I credibly represent a good hand given the cards on the board? And fifth, is he just so likely to have me beat or to bluff me off my hand that I should just check and see what develops later on? So let's take a look at another couple examples in this situation. Say you raise 10-9 on the button and the big blind calls. The flop is the ace of hearts, the 8 of spades, and the 7 of diamonds, and the big blind checks to you. Now let's just go ahead and answer our questions once again. How likely is it that he'll fold right now? It seems pretty likely, right? I mean, if he doesn't have an ace, he's got to be scared of it, considering we raise pre-flop. But if he calls right now, might I get him to fold later? I think the answer once again is yes. You know, he could easily have a hand like 7-6 or Jack-9 or, you know, even King-8 that would call a bet right now, hoping to improve on the turn, but planning to fold the turn if he doesn't improve. On the other hand, of course, he might have an ace, which will be tough to make him to fold. But, you know, given that he just called pre-flop, an ace is going to be a little less likely. Now, do I have any outs to improve, just in case he does have an ace and he calls me? Well, absolutely, right? We have an open-ended straight draw to the nuts. So when we have 8 outs to the nuts, we're not going to be too sad if we build the pot a little bit. Even if he is ahead now, you really do have a good chance to make a hand. So we're not sweating that too much. Now, can I credibly represent a hand? Absolutely, right? I mean, we raise pre-flop. There's an ace on the board. Why can't we have an ace? The ace is actually a very likely holding for us. Is he so likely to have me beat or to bluff me that I should just check and see what develops? I don't think so. Like I said, your opponent didn't re-raise pre-flop, so the ace is going to be less likely. And there really just aren't that many hands he can have that can raise here for value, besides the sets and 2-pair. And it's going to be really tough for him to bluff us, since we can obviously easily have the ace as well. Weighing all these factors together, this looks like a great spot to bet, even though we have just 10 high at the time. Now on the flip side, let's say we have ace-king and raise the button. The big blind calls again, and the flop is the 10 of hearts, the 9 of hearts, and the 7 of diamonds. How likely is it to fold right now? Not too high, right? I mean, he's very likely to have those middling cards that have connected with the board in some way. And of course, flush draws are possible too. So, you know, there's a lot of hands that he can continue on to the turn with if we bet. If he calls right now, might he fold to a bet later? Maybe, but you just don't know which cards are going to scare him, right? I mean, is he scared of a jack coming, which completes the 1-card straight, or does he have an 8 in his hand? Is a queen scary to him, or does he have a hand like queen 10 or queen 9? And if small cards come off, his potential pair that he has on the flop is still looking pretty good. So there's really not a high chance at all, I don't think, that he'll fold to another bet on the turn. Do I have outs to improve if he calls me? Well, yes and no, because we do have the 2 overcards, which are nice, but there's really no way to know if those cards even make us the best hand. An ace or a king could easily trap me if he has a pair with an ace or a king kicker right now, right? That would make him 2-pair. Or let's say he has queen jack, where the king makes him the nut straight. An ace or a king could easily trap me for a big pot if I make them on the turn or the river, and if I just check right now, I can actually, maybe even get him into situations with dominated aces or kings that I can get a few bets from later on. So, can I credibly represent a hand? I wouldn't say you can represent a hand that's so scary that he won't continue if this flop helped him. So, I would say, I mean, you sort of can, but he's going to have enough equity typically to continue anyway. So I don't think you can rep enough of a hand to get him to fold if he's connected with the board. Is he so likely to have me beat right now or to bluff me that I should just check? I would say probably. I mean, tough players are gonna even try to bluff you maybe with king queen or ace three here, hoping that you just don't have anything. If you check, they may just check it down with you and let you have the pot. We've already talked about all the connections of hands that he could easily have that are obviously calling a bet. And when he does connect with the board, our equity is not great with just two overcards. All these considerations together, this seems like a great spot to just check behind, saving those bluffs for later on and just not being too aggressive at this point. So obviously the most important thing when you're deciding whether or not to be aggressive is figuring out how likely it is you can make your opponent fold. If you think he will, go for it, but evaluate it first. Many players would just do so much better if they were able to recognize a few situations where to not attack boards that are particularly bad for them, and many opponents would do a lot better if they would just attack more boards. So what you need to do is find a really good balance of those times when you think it's tough for him to make a hand and when it would be easier for him to make a hand. Hopefully this video will get you guys going on the fast track to becoming aggressive but smart players. And until then, I hope you guys run well and hope to see you on the tables. Bye now.